Hi, this is Martha McCoy, and we have another cooking show for you. And today I have Sharon Kelly, and I'm so happy to be in your kitchen. This is just so much fun.
Thank you.
And you're going to do what for us today?
I think today we're going to work on Irish food since St. Patrick's Day is coming up and my grandfather was from Ireland. So we have a few more or less traditional type Irish foods. We're going to do a Guinness beer Irish stew. And traditionally in Ireland that's made with lamb, but lamb's pretty hard to get in Chanute, so we're going to substitute beef, and either one is quite acceptable. Then we're going to do a parsley mashed potato, because they eat potatoes over there a lot, even 2 times at one meal. So we'll serve the stew with the mashed potatoes. And then we're going to do a Irish scone, which is kind of like a soda bread, but it doesn't have the raisins or the currants in it, and it's kind of a cross between an English scone and a biscuit.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of times it's just served along as the main staple of bread. And then we'll end it off with a Bailey's Irish Cream Frozen Mocha Frappe.
Oh, right. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it's a whole day full, so we'll see how much we get crammed in.
Okay.
While we were talking, I'm browning a little bit of beef over here, about 1.5 pounds of chuck cubed. And I browned it in a hot pan, a pretty heavy pot, makes it a little bit better, until you get some nice color on that meat. And I did it in olive oil, but if you don't have olive oil, any cooking oil will suffice. I wouldn't recommend butter because butter will burn way too quickly. Then once this is browned, we're going to add 1 onion that is chopped finely, and cook it around a little bit, and 2 cloves of crushed garlic. And I've already done all of this ahead of time to save some time. Now this recipe can be adapted to the crock pot for all of these busy working people that still want that good long home cooked taste. So cook this up for just 2 or 3 minutes, Martha.
It looks like it's just going to be really good.
It is. Then we're going to deglaze the pan, which basically means nothing more than getting all of those crusty little bits off the bottom with a bottle of Guinness beer. And you want to use, Guinness is made in Ireland, it's a stout beer, and it's a very dark beer. And in the States, you can buy it in a draft form in a bottle as well, but you want to use just the stout, not the draft. So just pour it in there.
I didn't realize that would work to get it all off of the bottom.
Yes. And it adds a really strong depth of flavor to it and a beautiful color to the stew. Then you just want to scrape as much as you can to get all of those flavor bits.
Well, and cooking it got rid of all the alcohol content.
Yes.
Right. So it cooks it away.
Yes. Anytime you cook with alcohol, any boiling at all will evaporate all of the alcohol out of it. So it's perfectly safe for kids or anyone who doesn't want to have alcohol to eat. Then we're going to add 4 cups of water. And you can use beef broth if you want. I prefer beef base, which is a granulated beef made from drippings. And I add about 2 tablespoons to the pot, and that will substitute any beef broth that you want to use. So this is easily accessible in Chanute.
That's just what I was going to ask you. I have never bought this before.
Yes, you can buy it at the grocery store. It comes in chicken, beef, and ham.
Oh.
It's a great thing to keep on your shelf. The beef does have to be refrigerated. It replaces bouillon or beef broth, but you can use any of those 3, whatever you like. Then once this is all mixed together, we're going to add 1 cup of carrots, 1 cup of celery, 1 cup of parsnips, which you can buy in Chanute, 1 cup of potatoes, and 1 small turnip or a half of a large turnip. Now my children don't like turnips, and so I grate it so they don't know that it's in there. And you just
disguise it.
Pull these out of the water, because I had them soaking in the water, and just put them on in the pot. And that way, all the flavors from the vegetables will come out into the stew. If you parboil these, you won't get that same taste because you'll lose so much of the flavor of the vegetables in the cooking water.
Let me get this out of your way.
That'd be good. Thank you. Then we're going to salt and pepper to taste. And I use kosher salt. You don't have to use kosher salt. I just have for several years. And I usually always use fresh ground pepper. Then it does call for some spices. And in Ireland they don't have a lot of herbs fresh, but they do have some. You can substitute dry herbs for this, and on the recipe that I will give to you later, it'll say dried, but I grow my own herbs in the summer, and so I winter them over, and I just use the sprigs of thyme and some sprigs of parsley, and I've tied them together so that when the leaves fall off, we can just lift that string out and you won't have the sticks in the stew.
Okay.
And then to that, you also need 2 bay leaves.
Now, what'd you tie it together with?
Kitchen string.
Okay.
Which is waxed, so it doesn't just disintegrate.
Because I have tried that before, and I've ended up with the stems.
Oh.
And I'd have to pick them out.
Oh.
So but I'm glad to know that.
And then we'll add 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. And that just thickens it a little bit and gives it another depth of flavor. But you don't want to add too much because it does have a lot of sugar in it and you don't want your stew to be too sweet. Then basically when this is all mixed together, you can just walk off and leave it. And it needs to cook about 2 to 3 hours, depending on, how large a pot you have. And you can adjust the vegetables, whichever, if your family doesn't like parsnips and turnips, leave them out, add carrots and potatoes. You can add anything you want. This is just more of the traditional because the Irish people have a lot of root vegetables. And so that's what they usually cook this with.
Okay.
Then even though they have potatoes in their stew, they usually serve their stew alongside of a potato dish as well. So we're going to do some cream cheese and parsley mashed potatoes because it's a little stiffer and it will hold the stew sufficiently. So I have cooked 2 to 3 pounds. I use golden Yukon potatoes because they're not quite as starchy and they hold their shape better.
Okay.
I'm sure the Irish people don't care what kind of potatoes you use. And I'm going to add to that a half of an 8-ounce package of cream cheese cubed and 1 stick of real butter, and the real butter really makes a difference.
Oh, I bet it does.
And we're just going to add that right into these cooked potatoes. And then I add half and half. And I always warm the half and half because if you add the cold cream to the potatoes, it sometimes seizes a little bit. So if you just warm it up, it keeps everything much warmer, everything's just better to eat, and it's a creamier texture.
I had no idea about doing that.
Yes.
Whenever I make mashed potatoes, I just pour the cold milk right in. That's really good.
Just at least enough to take the chill off. It really does help, and it helps your potatoes from getting cold so quickly.
Yes, exactly. Well, I'm going to start warming it from now on.
And then, of course, with potatoes, you don't want to add a ton of cream at first. You want to get those loosened up quite a bit and then just kind of eye it from there. Now, if you're dieting, you can use a low-fat cream cheese. You can eliminate the cream cheese and use a little bit of sour cream or low-fat sour cream. But if you're going to go to all the trouble of making real mashed potatoes, you might as well just go all the way. And you can certainly use a mixer for this. It's just whatever you're used to doing.
I tell you, I use a hand potato masher. I just think it's so much better.
And I didn't use much cream.
No, you didn't. It's really creamy without using much
And then we're going to add some chopped parsley. Fresh parsley for sure. Dry parsley just is not going to give it the color or the flavor. And I'm using curly parsley, not a flat leaf parsley. I don't like the flavor of the flat leaf parsley in the potatoes.
Oh, okay.
So, and you just need about 2 or 3 tablespoons of the parsley.
So did you buy this at the store?
I did buy this at the store. Mine I do have, and I'll use it. I used mine in the stew, but at this time of year, mine's a little pale.
Mm-hmm.
And for St. Patrick's Day, we need things
It's
a
gotta
little
be.
bit greener.
Exactly.
And then simply salt and pepper to taste. Again, with the fresh ground pepper. And you can use white pepper if you don't want black flakes in. A lot of people don't care for the taste of white pepper. It's a little bit different. And you certainly, when you're making this meal, because the stew takes several hours to cook, you might want to hold off on making your potatoes for a while, or go ahead and make them and just keep them warm in a crock pot.
Okay.
Because they'll keep quite well, because you're going to want to serve it basically at the same time.
Well, and that's something I always want to do, is to have everything ready at the same time, so it's all hot.
And
everybody's
sometimes
ready.
that's difficult.
I know.
So now we'll go ahead and proceed to the scones, which are not difficult to make. However, my mother used to have a terrible time making them. But I think we've kind of gotten it down to where we can do it without much trouble. And I think they're easy enough that any beginning cook could do them. So the first thing we're going to do is, in this bowl, I have put 3½ cups of flour, just regular flour, and a teaspoon of baking soda.
Okay.
That's it. A little bit of salt. I tend to use a little more salt because I think it has a flat taste if it doesn't have enough salt in it. And that's all you do. You mix that together, and then you add, if you can hand me the buttermilk, Martha, from the fridge, second shelf. Then we're going to add about 2 cups of the cultured buttermilk. Now, if you don't have buttermilk, or if you want to make them in a hurry and you're out and you don't want to run to the store, you can substitute easily with just 2 cups of whole milk, or 2% will work if you have to, and a couple of teaspoons of vinegar, and let it sit for about 5 minutes, and you'll still have the same end result. You won't quite have the tanginess of the buttermilk. And then we're simply going to add that and stir it together with a fork. So it's similar to a biscuit in a way, but it has a tangier, more sourdough texture. And this recipe was it was actually my grandmother's recipe. My grandfather came here from Ireland, and this is one recipe that his mother had taught my grandmother to make. So it's been handed down for many years.
Definitely an Irish recipe.
Yes, it is. And the traditional Irish soda bread usually is a sweeter bread, and it has raisins, currants, sometimes caraway seed, and it reminds me more of a raisin bread than anything else. So then once this is pulled together, and you'll see it just like any basic bread or biscuit dough, it'll kind of pull away from the sides of the bowl. This is a little bit dry. We might add just a little bit more buttermilk in there. The original recipe was written in pounds of flour and pints of milk, and so I did have to put a little math to it and adjust it just a little bit. So
This is why we need math in school,
Yes.
so we'll understand all that.
then just flour a pastry cloth or a cutting board or even the kitchen counter with a little piece of wax paper. Don't keep yourself from cooking fun things just because you don't have all the equipment. You
Right.
can always make do. It should taste pretty much the same. Then we're just going to knead it for just a few kneads. Kind of similar, again, to kneading a biscuit. Just push and pull and roll, and that's about all there is to it. The trick with the scones, I think, is the way that they're baked in a pretty hot oven, about 400 degrees preheated. Then we're going to divide this. And this one, I think we're going to make maybe 4 of these.
Now, did you say you put baking soda or baking powder?
Baking soda.
Baking soda.
Where a biscuit does have baking powder, this has baking soda. And just form them into like a disc. And then we'll put them in a preheated 400 degree oven, and I use a cast iron skillet. And to that skillet we're going to add flour.
Oh, okay.
So you're basically baking it in a skillet, and you do keep the flour in there, and that will help brown it. And I just usually do 1 or 2 at a time.
Now, why are you using this? I have never used a
Cast iron skillet.
cast iron
They
skillet.
retain the heat better. They're heavy, so you get a more equal baking.
Okay.
Now the newer ones are all pre-seasoned, so you don't have to go through all of the hassle of seasoning the skillets and all of that.
And then how do you clean them then? Is there a
You
certain
just
way
rinse them out. Don't use a harsh soap, no harsh detergents. And then when you're finished, then you wipe them with a little oil to store them, and they won't rust and they'll last forever. So we'll just pop those in. And then I often take, and I'm only going to do this with 1 of them, but this is 1 egg beaten, mixed with about a tablespoon of water. It's a basic egg wash. We're just going to brush that on top of those, and then sprinkle it with some caraway seed.
Oh, okay.
So that will give you a little bit of extra crunch, little tiny bit of extra flavor. And if you do about half and half, then you've got a variation in the breads. And then they'll bake at about 20 minutes. Start checking them at about 18. They'll turn a little bit brown. And when we are finished, we'll have a product that looks like this. There's the one with the caraway, there's one without. And if you want to pull a piece off, Martha, you can taste, and they're just kind of similar to almost, I say, if I would have to describe them, I would say a sourdough biscuit. And let me give my hands a quick rinse to get that dough off.
They do that, have that taste. You have this over there too?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you. And so then, because I have 2 ovens, but I only have 1 skillet, so I can't cook more than 2 or 3 at a time. But for time's sake, I did pre-bake some this morning so that you could see what those are like.
Those are just gorgeous.
And then, so we've got our stew cooking, and we've got our potatoes resting. We have our bread cooking, so we'll go to the fun part.
Oh boy.
This is a Bailey's Irish cream. It's a frozen mocha frappe, or basically a blended iced coffee with cream, or a frozen dairy drink, whatever. This is one that takes a little bit of preparation ahead of time, because you need to freeze in ice cube trays the base mixture. And then, but it's handy because then you can pop them out of the freezer whenever you want them, and they're ready to go. So in a bowl, right down here, Martha, in that cabinet.
Down here?
Yes. We're going to add 4 cups of brewed coffee.
Is this big enough?
Yes. measuring cup right here. So we're going to add 4 cups of brewed coffee, and I just used a regular coffee. You can use whatever coffee you want. This I did make a little bit stronger than usual because it's going to dilute a little bit because of the ice and the cream and that kind of thing. So 4 cups of brewed coffee, you do want it hot. And then to that coffee, you're going to add 4 packets of any brand of hot cocoa mix. You can use, I just happen to have the Starbucks one here, but you can use Swiss Miss, you can use Hershey's, whatever kind you want. But it's just 4 of the 1 ounce packages of the hot cocoa. So at the end of the season, when you're not going to use it, this is a great way to use that up. And it is supposed to warm up one of these days,
Yes. Wouldn't that be
and
nice?
hopefully we'll be ready for some iced drinks instead of the hot cocoa things.
Now, can you make this so it would be hot? Or is it something that it's basically to be cold?
You could make it hot. There wouldn't be any problem with that at all. Once you'd mix it together, you just simply go ahead and add your creams and reheat it so that your cream and everything would be warm. And you're going to add 4 tablespoons of just normal granulated sugar. So it is a little bit sweet because most of those cocoa packets have some sugar in them, but if you want to cut that sugar down, they sell the diet cocos.
Yes.
And you can use a sugar substitute as well, as long as you just go ahead and do your equivalents. Because with the substitutes, you won't use nearly the amount of sugar that you do use for this. And these are unfortunately jumbo ice cube trays, but just the normal ice cube trays will work fine. It's kind of hard to find ice cube trays these days.
I was just thinking that. I have to go searching.
So then you just simply fill them, not quite clear the top, because when that freezes it will expand a little bit.
Right.
And then once these are filled, you just pop them in the freezer and let them go. And they'll keep a few weeks in the freezer in a Ziploc bag. I mean, once they're frozen, I just take them out and pop them into a bag.
Oh, it
And
smells.
then one batch will
really
make 2 of these large.
Oh.
So I'm not sure, Martha, on the small ones, but I would think it would make 2 or 3 of the small ones
I bet it
easily.
does.
Okay, so when they're frozen and all of that's over with, they'll look just like big coffee ice cubes, like that. So then we're gonna, these are a little, well, they're starting to soften up a little bit. I am gonna zap them in the microwave for just a second, and that way it won't take quite as long to use them in the blender. And you just simply take them, if you'll hand me a blender right there. We're just going to pop them in the blender. There's a plug-in right on this side. And then Martha, if you'll hand me the whipping cream and the half and half from the top refrigerator shelf. And I used about half of them. And let's see, we still need the heavy whipping cream. And right behind it in the red. Right there. And we're gonna use about a cup of each. So this certainly isn't low fat, but
No, but it's going to be really good.
yes. And then we're gonna add 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And I'm not very good at measuring, so usually I can gear it by the lid. So we're just gonna guess at that. And then we're gonna put in 2 shots of Bailey's Irish cream liqueur. That's right there. This Bailey's comes in all different flavors now, and I'm not quite sure how the other flavors will taste in it. But I don't know why you couldn't try the caramel or the.
Well,
Just trying to get it open,
so many of the coffee drinks, they have so many different
Yes.
kinds now.
And I'm just going to kind of eye this as
Okay.
2 shots. Keep in mind I'm not a bartender, so. And then we're going to add the cream and we're going to blend.
Oh my, this is.
And this might take a little bit, so bear with me because sometimes this. Okay, Martha, if you'd like to hand me one of those.
Well, you want one too, right?
Oh, well, I suppose I do.
I'd say. Oh.
And then we can garnish these if you want with whipped cream, with a cherry. You can drizzle some chocolate on top.
Oh, it smells heavenly.
So,
Goodness.
happy St. Patrick's
Yes,
Day
same
to
to
you.
you. Oh my, that is so good.
It is pretty tasty.
Whoa.
So now let's go and check that stew
Yes.
and our other little projects and see if they're about ready to come out. If you'll hand me that plate, Martha, we'll just see. And I think the way we're going to serve this is simply to do the potatoes to one side. And then we'll just ladle some of the stew, which you can tell it has an extremely rich color to it.
Oh, it does. Beautiful.
And then we can put a chunk of the soda bread right next to it. And you have a pretty stout.
Oh, yes. That is gorgeous. Just gorgeous.
And that didn't take too long at all, did it?
It
No.
didn't.
So I wish all of you a happy St. Patrick's Day and enjoy the food.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. This is Martha McCoy for the Chinook Channel.